Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to just discuss what happened at the Rwanda Safety Bill vote last night as the so-called Tory rebellion melted down the drain. Why did it happen and what's going to happen next? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel. So for those who haven't caught up yet, the Rwanda Safety Bill completed its passage through the House of Commons last night, a bill that most Conservative MPs never really wanted and yet passed to appease their swivel-eyed loon colleagues on the far right who have done nothing but complain about it. The House of Commons, like all national legislative bodies around the world, often criticises other countries for breaking international norms and laws. Like other countries, we often do so selectively, but it is still done. The next time we do so, we are going to be laughed at. Because although James cleverly told the Commons that he is confident the bill respects international law, the note that he personally included on page 1 of the bill says otherwise. Independent experts have also said there's absolutely no doubt this bill breaches international law. Rishi Sunak has urged the House of Lords not to interfere with the bill. I imagine that when they discuss it, their response to Sunak will be in the form of a two-fingered salute. But what was remarkable was not just that the bill passed the Commons, that was expected, despite the threats of MPs on the right, it's that it passed so easily. There wasn't even a petulant last stand. The so-called rebellion completely disappeared. The headline in The Guardian today reads, Sunak's Rwanda Bill survives as Tory revolt melts away, for now. There's no for now about it. The rebellion completely capitulated. Most of the rebels actually voted in favour of the bill. There was very little abstaining. Consider there were 61 Conservative MPs supported the rebel amendments and only 11 Conservative MPs voted against it and 18 Conservative MPs who abstained, and a few of those who abstained were not on the far right, they abstained for other reasons, right? So most of the rebel MPs who supported that amendment voted for the unamended bill. So what happened? Well, in reality, the feebleness of the rebellion before Christmas at the last vote told me that we should not expect the bill to fail. I said at the time, what the likes of the ERG wanted, the leaders of the far right, they wanted their MPs to abstain at that last vote so that they could give Sunak a message. If it only just sneaked through the last reading, they could send him a message, you need to amend it, otherwise it won't go through at the third reading. But that didn't happen. He won it easily, and he's won it easily again. What happened is various groups on the far right are as politically inept as Sunak himself in many ways. They committed themselves to an obviously losing strategy, and they gave themselves no room for manoeuvre. If they described the bill as essentially, it's fine, yeah, it's okay, yeah, it's sort of doing what we want it to do, but we just think there's a few loopholes that could cause problems, so these amendments will deal with those loopholes. If they'd done that, they'd have still left themselves the room to vote for the bill when the amendments failed. But they completely committed themselves. They publicly and noisily described the bill in its original form as unworkable, fundamentally unworkable, cannot do its job, actually makes things worse. That their amendments didn't just improve the bill, were essential to the legislation doing anything. That's what they said. As a result, once the amendments failed, as they were always going to do, can't believe they ever thought they were going to get them through, they left themselves no way out. If they'd stopped the bill from passing in the Commons, they'd have been left with two choices. The first would be a snap election, and a proper snap election. It would have to be announced in very short order, meaning March or probably more likely April rather than May. People on most of those on the far right don't want a general election anytime soon, any more than Sunak does, especially under these circumstances, because if they defeated their own Rwanda plan, what do they make of them? What is their main plank of their hastily arranged campaign? Can't be stop the boats because they insist that the only way to do it is the Rwanda plan and they voted against it. The second would be replacing Sunak. So why didn't they do this? Well, I did discuss a report in the Express a couple of months ago which claimed that the various groups on the far right wanted to oust Sunak. They were ready to do it, but were planning on doing it in January because they needed to work out which candidate to back. Right? There's several different groups on the far right. They all want their own person to take over the party. None of these groups is large enough in itself to achieve that. So they needed to work together. So they were going to spend a couple of months trying to work together. This has obviously not occurred. The obvious conclusion is that either the different far-right groups simply cannot agree to back a common candidate, or there are lots of their number who don't see the point in replacing Sunak this side of the election at all. Remember, 61 Tory MPs backed the rebel amendment, but there's believed to be about 115 Tory MPs on what we would call the far right. So it got a majority of the far right back in the rebel amendment, but by no means all, or anywhere close to all. So whichever it is, it highlights two things. First, the far right are still very, very divided. If you look at the breakdown of the votes, 11 Tory MPs vote against it, which includes some prominent leaders of the far right, but not all. It included Suella Braverman, Mark Francois, Danny Kruger, Miriam Cates. But it was only 11 voted against and 18 abstained. And as I say, some of those abstentions, like one included Theresa May. She's not on the far right. So, you know, some of them were for genuine reasons. Second, it shows that the far right have no more strategic aptitude than Sunak himself. They now look stupid. Every rebel who abstained looks like they lack the resolve to challenge a bill that they insist only makes things worse. But the majority of rebels voted in favour of the bill. They look like proper Charlies now, because they voted in favour of a bill which they insisted just hours before cannot work. Jacob Rees-Mogg was torn apart by a journalist for this ridiculous situation. His protestations were pointless. He had clearly said the bill cannot work without the amendments, and he voted in favour of the unamended bill. They all look incredibly stupid, but arguably none more so than Brendan Clark-Smith. You know, along with Lee Anderson, he resigned his position as deputy chair of the Conservative Party on Tuesday in order to back the rebel amendment, but then ended up voting for the unamended bill last night. Essentially, anyone on the payroll, as it's termed, has to back the government or resign. So Clark-Smith had a choice. He could support the bill and keep his job, or resign and rebel against the government. He chose to resign and then support the government's bill anyway. The entire episode is just embarrassing. I often talk about Sunak's strategic ineptitude, but this farce has highlighted that the entire party is just incapable of intelligent thought. You know, what a fiasco. And to highlight the utter stupidity of the various MPs involved, let's go over a couple of gems from these cretins. Theresa Coffey has been in cabinet for years, now a backbencher, but she's been in cabinet for years. She tried to attack Labour's Yvette Cooper because Cooper had referred to Kigali. And Coffey was saying, well, she doesn't even know what country it is. She's talking about this Kigali. It's Rwanda, dear. It's Rwanda. And you could just imagine all of her colleagues trying to send telepathic messages to it. No, Dr. Coffey. Because remember, she's a doctor. She's got a PhD. So at one point in her life, at least, she was clever. So behind those cold, soulless, bespectacled eyes, there's a brain beating, right? Dr. Coffey, they must have been urging. Kigali is the capital city of Rwanda. You're making yourself look a right tit. But then, although you associate intelligence, knowledge and wisdom together, it's possible to have an abundance of one and critical shortages of the others. As thick as a whale omelette. Made herself look completely stupid. And yet she was one of the most senior members of the government for years. What does it say about the general state of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that she was a leading light? But Lee Anderson, I think, was the one who took the prize for dumbest things said last night. He abstained from the bill rather than voting against it. He certainly wasn't intended to make himself look as stupid as Clark-Smith by resigning and then backing the government anyway. But he claimed in an interview with his employers, GB News, that he was going to vote no. Oh yeah, I was totally going to vote no. I was in the no lobby and everything. And he said, but Labour MPs were laughing and giggling at him. So he ran away to cry in a corner. Can you believe it? This self-described hard man of politics, and by his own admission, was chased off by sniggering from opposition MPs. That is such an easy attack line for his Labour challenger in Ashfield, right there. There's going to be hustings. When the general election campaign starts, he's going to go out about, there's going to be debates. There's going to be times when the candidates are all assembled to take questions, to make their pitch, take questions from the public. Every time he tries to claim that he would support or oppose a certain policy, All his challenger has to do is say, unless someone sniggers at you, in which case you're going to run and cry in a corner, aren't you? I mean, there's a sense in which this level of stupidity is funny because it's happening to the Tories. I mean, you try and imagine if it happened in Labour in 10 years' time, you'd think, oh, because you can imagine all these sort of Conservative supporters with their head in their hands. But there's a point at which it goes to a new level where it's actually embarrassing for everyone. I feel embarrassed watching it. You know, even as Anderson's political opponent, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for the people of Ashfield. Because regardless of political views, this is objectively an incredibly stupid thing to have both done and said. That he couldn't vote no because someone sniggered at him. But the most important clip I saw of the proceedings last night wasn't from some bonehead of an MP, and there was a whole list of stupid things said, but from a BBC editor, Nicholas Watt, said that he'd been pulled aside in the last few days various times by senior members on the far right. He described it, I think, as the right of the Conservative Party. It's the same thing. And he was told, oh, the momentum's with us. Things are going to happen. This is going to be a big deal this week. This shit's going down. He didn't say that. But that's the gist of it, that he was told, oh, yes, we're going to do it now. We've got Sunak by the balls. We're going to, if he doesn't do what we say, we're going to bring him down. We have got the numbers to do it. He said now, after the vote, they won't even catch his eye. They won't even catch his eye. So what is he saying? He's reporting that the movers unshaken on the far right believed that they had this. They shouted at their colleagues, follow me, as they charged at Sunak, looked round their shoulders and found nobody was with them. That, more than anything, highlights the fact that the rebellion is dead. Not for now, for good, at least until the election. And there won't be a rebellion after the election because Sunak will just resign anyway. The MPs on the far right have clearly got no faith that their so-called leaders have the faintest notion of what they're doing. They looked at them and they said, right, what you're asking us to do is to bring down the government. That doesn't help us, does it? There is no leadership of the far right. Their leaders, just like they did before Christmas, urged their colleagues to do something. Their colleagues completely ignored them on a large scale. They may not have faith in Sunak, but they've got none at all in their own champions. That is how inept they are. They actually made it look like Sunak faced them down. He didn't. They just weren't prepared for a general election or to replace him. But they can't say that publicly, so they have to make themselves look like they've been shown who's boss by Sunak. Embarrassing. The best thing Sunak can do now is completely ignore it. I mean, by all means, let the Lords muck about with it and then chunter about unelected Labour peers. By all means, try and make it a party political issue. But ultimately, forget about it. Burn the Stop the Boats lectern. Never use it again. In fact, he should call a meeting of the far right. Oh, you want to have a meeting with me? I'll have a meeting with you now. Stand up, get the assembled members of the far right in front of him. Mark Francois sat at the front there, Lee Anderson there. He should stand up and say, right, you're all my bitches now. Because what are you going to do? You showed me last night you don't want to replace me and you don't want a snap general election. And those are your options. And you burnt them both. So do you know what? You're going to unite with us now. Because if you don't, you're going to make it worse for yourself. You are all my bitches. He won't though, will he? Because he's too weak. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.